Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the beginning of my 60th anniversary month roundup for Doctor Who. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Next Doctor. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I am a geek. You're watching Kevin the Geek. And today I am actually going to be reviewing, for the first time in a little while, an episode of Doctor Who. Now, if you haven't been to see any of my videos previously, so far up to this point, I have reviewed every single episode of New Who Doctor Who, starting with Rose, all the way through until the end of Series 4. That I finished around about mid-September-ish time. I just took a little bit of time off just so I could kind of refresh and gather my thoughts a little bit, but also I wanted to save these these reviews for the 60th anniversary month. So coming up this month, amongst loads of Doctor Who related content this month, I'm going to be reviewing all four of the 2009 kind of specials that rounded up the time of David Tennant's time as the Doctor, and also of course Russel T Davies' time as showrunner for Doctor Who. I've got plenty of reactions planned for the month. I've got plenty of rankings planned for the month. And of course, when the 60th anniversary specials airs on the 25th of November, and of course then the dates going into November, I will be reacting to those. I will be providing both a condensed and a full-length reaction to those. So make sure you kind of stay tuned for that, because that is going to be an epic time once we get into those. Now, if you have missed it, earlier on today, I actually released my my reactions for the very first time to the very first 4 episodes of classic Doctor Who from the time back in 1963 when, obviously, the BBC never knew if it was going to be any good or not. They never knew that it would end up running for 60 years. They just thought, let's make a TV programme, let's hope for the best. And of course, we're here, 60 years later, still talking about this show. So I reacted to basically the first serial, An Unearthly Child. So make sure you check out that video if you have not already seen it. And of course, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, smash that like button, and of course, drop your comments down below. But we're here today to talk about The Next Doctor.
Where the hell have you been?
Right then, don't worry. Stand back. What have we got here then?
Hold on, who are you?
I'm the Doctor. Simply the Doctor. The one, the only, and the best.
So, the first thing that most people think about when they think of The Next Doctor is they do think it is a bit clickbaity, isn't it? Now, in preparing for this review today, I did go back and rewatch the episode. But what I also did is I went back and checked out the ending of Journey's End, which of course was the episode immediately preceding this one, the end of Series 4. And I think the version I watched may be different to what I watched when I very first aired it. Because if I remember rightly, and I could be completely wrong here, but I have a memory that there was a bit of a trailer for the Christmas episode that aired, after the credits of the Journey's End episode. And there was that teaser saying, like something like the Doctor will return in The Next Doctor. And so I do feel that this was a little bit clickbaity, and it was a bit of a publicity stunt in kind of the same way that it was with the Doctor's daughter, and not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, as long as the episode as a whole does deliver on what it set out to do. And I'm still, to this point, nearly 15 years later, still a bit, I get it and I don't get it. It is a difficult one. Now, also, please do make sure you stick around for the ending of the episode, where I'm going to give this episode, as I do with all of my Doctor Who episodes, a score out of 100 and give it a grading. So make sure you stick around to the end of the episode where you can find out my scores. Now, let's start, as I typically normally do, with the Doctor. But more specifically, let's talk about the next Doctor, Jackson Lake, played by David Morrissey. Now, as the Doctor, let's take, first of all, his costume. Because the costume of the Doctor is very, very iconic. And each Doctor has their own individual style. And the costume chosen to give to David Morrissey for his role as Jackson Lake / the Doctor, I felt that it was very fitting for two reasons. I don't know why I did it like that. Two reasons. The first one is, obviously, as the Doctor's outfit, it definitely worked. It is something that is kind of quirky enough and sort of, practical enough that it wouldn't necessarily get in the way. Because that's some of the things that you look at some of the costumes. Things like Tom Baker's scarf. Now, granted, I've not really seen much of Classic Who full stop. And so, for me, my always thought process is, surely that scarf must have got in the way somewhat and must have restricted the movement somewhat or restricted some of the things that they were doing. But ultimately, I need to see that to find out more, obviously. But here with Jackson Lakes / the Doctors, it is something that works for the Doctor, yet also the moment that you realise that he is Jackson Lake, he is a human of the Victorian era, it completely and utterly works for his character. And that is something that I feel was really had to be thought of, really specifically. Because if you went with something that was too far out there, that would be going, yes, this is the Doctor, it wouldn't necessarily be believable when you realise he was Jackson Lake. And if you went too far the opposite way and didn't make it feel believable as the Doctor, something just wouldn't have worked. And so I feel that they found a really good balance for that costume. Now, the performance of David Morrissey, again, in the time when he believes he is the Doctor, I really liked it. He gave enough of a sense to be this sort of swashbuckling hero, and he did enough to make it that he was sort of impersonating David Tennant while at the same time not impersonating David Tennant, and his 10th Doctor. Because that's the other thing you've got to remember is because of the whole concept behind it with the info stamp thing, if it went wrong, he is believing he is a Doctor, and because it kind of ended, it was on David Tennant's Doctor, there's no more information after that, and that's when it malfunctioned. It makes sense that he would believe that he is a bit like David Tennant's Doctor. So he is quite charming. He is quite swashbuckling. He is very brave and handsome and daring. So the balances did really work. When it became Jackson Lake, there was maybe not quite as much intrigue around him. And I think that's the issue with this episode, with the setup and the way that it's created to be, such tease to make you think, okay, this is the person that is going to be taking over after David Tennant retires. Which, if I remember correctly, at this point, I don't think it had been announced. Because he announced his leaving at, I think it was like the National Television Awards, which I think was in the January. So that would have been, within about a month or so of this episode airing. So at this point, you didn't know if David Tennant was going to be continuing on for, a year. You didn't know if it was going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You just didn't know anything. So it was very much a tease. And if he had come back as the Doctor, I don't think I would have minded. I think he would have made a very strong Doctor. But I would have liked to have seen him be a little bit different than the Jackson Lake Doctor within this episode, had he come back as a Doctor in his own right. Now, the Doctor himself, David Tennant, he was slightly above average. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is one of his better performances. I don't think that this episode and this story really lended itself to David Tennant giving an absolute masterclass performance. He was very functional in what he needed to do. it would be a bit of a disservice to call him average, but he is only just a little bit above average in my personal opinion. Now, one of the categories I will normally score out of 10 to give my overall score is the companion, and that's where Jackson Lake I would feel fits in this one, because Rosita, she is definitely more of a supporting character. Yes, she plays a companion role to the Doctor, but as a companion role to the Doctor, she doesn't really do a lot. She was alright. You know, there was nothing really stand out about her. She was a typical Cockney one, and I vaguely remember, I think I saw her in a couple of kids' TV shows when I was a kid, and at that time she would have been in the sort of maybe 15, 16-ish sort of age range when she did those kids shows. So this point, she was maybe only a couple of years older, and personally, I didn't think the character that she played in this was really a whole lot different than the character that she played in some of those. So, yeah, she was just fine. She was just there. Now, the villains. The villains in this one. Obviously, we have Miss... what was it? Miss Hartigan? I think it was Miss Hartigan. I think that was the name of her. The one who basically becomes the Cyber King. And then you, of course, have the Cybermen themselves. And I have to say, for the Cybermen, this was a bland episode for them. It really, really was. There was nothing special about them. There was nothing unique. Maybe you could argue the Cyber Shades, which were the ones that were sort of supposed to be, had the minds of a dog or a cat. I mean, more inclined to say it was probably the mind of a dog. Because at times rewatching this, I was trying to really scrutinise it this time around. And I feel that the way that they are is very much almost like a sheepdog in a way, but also a bit of a guard dog. So I wonder if it was a dog, what kind of dog it would have been. You know, something that would have been sort of a rounding up kind of dog that's really good at kind of crowd control and stuff. But then also, what kind of one would it have been to have been a guard dog? And I don't think the Cyber Shades have been used in Doctor Who before. Now, again, I could be completely wrong, but I don't know of an instance. And if they were, a new creation to the series, it at least gave them something slightly different. Oh, and of course, the only other technical thing that you've got difference is this whole Cyber King thing, which the CGI of it just really ages this episode badly. For something in 2009, and when I talk about CGI, I always like to preface this that, TV budgets are of course always going to be very different to movie budgets, and so you're not going to have the whole massive range of special effects to make it look completely believable, that you would if you're doing it in a movie. But, yeah, it definitely still could have looked quite a bit better. And the whole concept of it, it felt like it was just like, we need to have this big, massive, grand scale thing at the end. What can we do about it? Okay, let's have a giant Cyberman. The one thing I will say is the design of it, making it very kind of Victorian era. So there's lots of like cogs and levers. I quite like that. It's like the Cybermen knew what a Cyber King was, when they said it's like a dreadnought battleship kind of thing, but they had to make it using current Earth technology, and so you would have to use things like cogs and springs and various things like that. So the design of it, whilst the CGI was bad, I at least commend them for thinking a little bit with that. And the same goes for the earpods. We've seen that in other episodes featuring the Cybermen in New Who. And in this one, again, I tried to pay quite close attention. I wasn't able to get a clear shot, but from what I could see of them, they were very much they didn't look modern. Although you had like the blue flashing lights on, the other aspect of it was, you could tell it was using current Earth metal, current Earth technology. And so I like the thought process for the production team, the costume designers, things like that, in making it familiar enough for fans to just instantly see them and go, okay, this is what it is, and this is how we know they're kind of converted, but also just enough different to make you believe that, yes, this is technology of its time. And whilst I'm kind of on this subject about kind of, the costumes aspect, if you've seen any of my reviews before, you'll know that, to be honest, I am a bit of a sucker for more historical episodes, because I like things like the costumes and the sets behind them, and I like to see if there's things that look out of place. And once again, they've done a pretty reasonable job. I would always say that the Victorian era is going to be one of the slightly more easier ones to kind of replicate, but in of itself, it was still pretty good. And I liked the fact that they use like splashes of colour in this, particularly with the dress of Miss Hartigan, when she goes through that funeral scene, when she goes to get the workhouse bosses to get them converted. It's all very black and dreary and dull, and she just comes in, and it immediately takes your eye, and she immediately looks out of place in that scene if you look at it, out of context. But I feel that there's obviously that reason behind it. It's supposed to make her be out of place, because she is an out of place person, not just being, someone who wants to be evil and take over these people and commit evil deeds, but because, and the Reverend said it, because she's a woman, and of that time, a woman would not be welcome at somewhere like this event. So it's a very clever way of just contextualizing something and being a little bit kind of thought-provoking with that. So again, I quite commend the costume and the set designers for putting all these little bits together. Finally, of course, the music, again, kind of similar to what I was saying with the Doctor. There was nothing really kind of stand out with it. We've got a couple of the theme motifs that you've heard before, and most notably the Cyberman theme. And of course, because these are Cybermen, of course, it made sense that they had to use that theme that we would have had back in Age of Steel and Rise of the Cybermen. So, it was a good piece of music. It kind of played it along, nicely throughout the episode, but there wasn't anything really shout out about it. So that is my review of this episode. Now, before you go anywhere, of course, like I said earlier, I have to score this episode. So what I do is I give 10 categories a score out of 10 to give me that overall score out of 100, and that enables me to rank all of the episodes of Doctor Who, and I will later on this month do a ranking for the entire run of Russell T Davies' era, featuring all of the episodes that we've had up until the end of time, so you can see where all of the episodes fall by my rankings. But for right now, this is my scores. And so there you have it. This episode scores 63 marks out of 100, which makes it a C+ rated episode. It's not really anything to shout out about. The main hook of it was the idea that David Morrissey was coming in, and he's been announced that he is going to be the next Doctor. And of course, at this point, we were only about a week or two away from Matt Smith being announced as the next Doctor. And at this point, again, if I remember correctly, they had already announced that there was going to be this special episode of Doctor Who Confidential on New Year's Day of 2009, that they were going to reveal who was going to be playing the next Doctor. And so, was it a sneaky way of trying to disguise the fact that it was going to be Matt Smith? Yes, it is. Is it clickbaity? Yes, it is. Do I really mind? It's debatable. I like the idea of it, but what I've always wanted for so many years is I'd like to actually have a surprise regeneration. I would actually like a situation where you're watching an episode and the person who is going to be coming in next to be the Doctor is actually a surprise. And admittedly, we did have that last year, but I wasn't very happy with it. That's the one where, of course, it had already been announced that Ncuti Gatwa was going to be taking over as the next Doctor. And so everyone very rightly presumed it was going to be Jodie Whittaker, into Ncuti Gatwa. But they decided to pull a bit of a red herring on us and a little twist and pull the rug from under us and bring back David Tennant. I still don't know how I feel. I think I will be able to give you a better answer to that once I've seen the 3 episodes that he's going to be featuring in before, obviously, the Christmas episode of this year, which, of course, will be the first episode featuring Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor. But this is going to round up my review of The Next Doctor. What are your thoughts to this episode? Please drop them in the comments down below. If you've not done so already, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and smash that like button. But for today, although it's only November, Merry Christmas to you all, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of days' time, where you can check out my ranking video of the best episodes written by Russel T Davies in his first run as showrunner. That's going to be coming out later this week. And of course, if you missed it earlier on today, please go back and check out my reaction to the first 4 episodes ever of Doctor Who from the serial and An Earthly Child. But for now, my name's Kevin. I am a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.